Hey y'all, I'm James Wright and welcome to my shop. Today we're going to be talking about beam drills. We're going to be restoring this one and, well, turning it blue. So let's dive in and have a little bit of fun. This beam drill I actually purchased at Facebook Marketplace. A guy was selling it online and I bought it with a lot of other tools and paid $80 for this and a bunch of other tools. I got an absolute steal. The price-wise, this was about $20 worth of that $80. So yeah, don't come across this very often. The last one I got at the MWTCA meet, and that was, I believe, $120. So this was a good deal. We're going to start by taking this apart. Most of it is pretty obvious. Take this bolt off, take that bolt off. You need to take the top off so you can slide off the main drilling rig. I was really checking through these screws and I was surprised with how short some of these are. These ones particular here are only 3/4 inch or less. So I wanted to replace some of them with a little bit longer screws because that's one of the common problems with these is they tend to wiggle loose very easily. And several of these had actually been replaced with bolts that go all the way through instead of just screws. This particular piece is what holds the riding rail, and I had to make sure I got the right locations on that. So at this point, I'm actually looking at all the pieces and making sure that they are in good shape. Is there anything I need to replace? Is there anything I need to go and buy? Is there anything that needs some more work? And most everything on the base here was actually looking really good. It was dirty, needed a good bit of work, but it was okay. The vertical rails, though, had a lot of cracks and splits, and this sliding rail that I'm taking off right now was actually bent on one of them. As you can see here, it has a curvature to the board underneath that's supported with. So I was thinking, I'm thinking I'm going to have to replace those on top. For the main frame here, this was a bit more fun to take apart. These screws had been mushroomed over inside, so they took a good bit of torquing to get them out and make sure that everything was good on them, and then I had to clean up the threads so that everything went back in. But in the end, it actually came out pretty well. Most everything on this is held together with pins, which you can drive out. You have to be very, very careful. Here, I was not being careful because I'm putting all the force onto the frame. I wanted to see if I could lightly tap it out. No, not the case. So most of the time you actually want to hold the pieces that you're pounding on rather than pounding on any of the cast iron because that's where most of the problems come. I'm actually using WD-40 Rust Specialist to remove the rust on this, and it did a phenomenal job. I generally use that over Evaporust because I can get it locally, but yeah, it's about the same. Evaporust has a little bit longer life to it. Some of this I had to get out gear pullers. Some of it I was able to pound out. And then I found a crack in the main frame, and I was going to shoot a video of having it brazed, but a friend of mine was actually able to do it, and I was not able to shoot the video because of the time he was able to do it for me, so I wasn't able to fix that. Onto the arms, I'm going to be replacing all of the uprights and the top due to all those cracks. So I'm going to use one of them as a pattern. This one actually had a pretty good shape to it. However, it had some splits at one end, so I just had to make sure I worked around that. So I'm laying it out on some white oak, and this was originally made in oak, so yeah, it's kind of nice. But I need to make a rabbet all the way along here, and it's easier to make the rabbet first and then cut everything else around it so that the ends are square. The rabbet on this was about 1/4 inch in and a little over 1/4 inch down, and this gave the space for the sliding frame to wrap around the rails and then fit into the wood without running into the wood. Once that's done, then we can cut off all of the angles and basically get this to the right shape. The only tricky part on this was the long straight cut, and I used that for the last one. Ripping long straight lines, most of the time it's easier to do on the saw bench, but with smaller things like this, it's sometimes hard to hold them in place. You either have to clamp them or you have to put your knee on the corner. And in cases like that, I actually find it much easier and simpler to cut vertically at the bench. So it's nice to be ambidextrous and be able to do both of them at the bench or at the saw bench, because sometimes one is better than the other. And now that I have one in place, I'm actually going to use this as the pattern for the other one because I want these two rails to be identical. They don't have to be exactly the same as the original, but these two have to be identical. And then to clean up all of the saw marks, you can clamp them up and keep the one side that is true together, and that way you can plane them all up and bring them into absolutely identical with each other along the long faces and on the short faces anywhere where it's sawn. On the top of these, we need to actually cut in. There is a tenon that sticks up into the top piece. And this tenon will actually have a bolt that goes through it. But we need to create the tenon first, then create the mortise, and then drill the hole all the way through it. Now, in between, we're pulling out pieces and working on the steel, so I'm pulling them out of the bath that they've been sitting in. I actually had them sit in for a little over 24 hours. I think it was about 30 hours or so that they were in the bath. And most of the parts, that was good. Some of them I had to make sure you degrease them before putting them in because there's a lot of grease and slag on these. Some of them I was thinking about sandblasting, but in the end, most of them I just, after washing them, I put them in there and it took care of them pretty well. Yes, there's a ring trick. This lets me know that I'm drilling level. This is the top cap, and you can see the old one behind where I'm going to be replacing it. I'm basically making it identical to that, except for where the mortises are. Those need to match the mortises on the verticals. There's also a little notch in here for a stop to go in. You can see the little metal piece beside. This will be what holds the whole rig up while you're not drilling. The old one had been worn out, and that stop was crushed back in and basically was not usable anymore. Here you can see we drilled the holes through, and that let us know where our bolt will be going into. And now we need to drill out or chop out the mortises that the top verticals will then sit into. Want to make sure we're at the right depth. So I have a depth gauge that I've set up to the depth of the tenon to make sure the mortise goes down the exact depth it needs to go down. You can see how these then fit in. Now we need to drill the hole down through the top plate and then all the way into the vertical there. So I'm going to clamp this all in place, put it in, and because I have the hole pre-drilled into the top, it sets up the exact location to drill in. Put a flag on there at the depth it needs to go down, and now we have a hole for the bolt to go in. Let's go back over to the steel frames. You can see this is the piece that had the crack, and so my friend sandblasted it and then actually welded the crack back together rather than brazing. In this particular case, it ended up being a little bit better to weld it. That's a topic I want to go into some point, welding and brazing. There's some interesting things on that. The rest of these just came out of the bath and are ready to go. So we're going to hit them with a self-etching primer. Originally, I was thinking, maybe I'll Japan this. But then after thinking about my wife and having to do it in the house, one of these days I'll have a Japanning oven somewhere else because Japanning it makes the whole house reek. There's just no way around it. You have to do it outside the house. And it's not a huge problem for me, but for my wife, it was an issue. I wanted to stain them a little bit darker because I'm going to leave the base, so I wanted them to be close to it, but I wanted them to be very obvious that they were new. So I'm actually going to use some golden oak Minwax stain and put that on there. And we can pull off all the tape and start putting this thing together. Now that it is all finished and on, we're good to go. So I stained it, and then I coated them in boiled linseed oil and paste wax for the wood, and all of that is good. On the base, most of this was okay, but there was a lot of old junk, beaten in paint and Japanning, dirt and grime, and a lot of this just comes off with a scraper. Really quick and easy. You can scrape off the surface and clean it out. Some of the tongue and groove had big chunks of schmoo jammed in there, and the tongue and groove wouldn't actually close up anymore. So you can scrape it all out, and it's good to go. And then with the boiled linseed oil, I'm putting that right over top of the old pieces as well as the new pieces. And I really love this part where you can see the life coming back into the wood, and it looks happy. And that's pleasing to me. 2 coats of boiled linseed oil, let it soak in, wipe off the excess, let it dry a little bit, and then came at them with paste wax, which I do sell in the shop, the paste wax. Now it's time to reassemble. Yay, happiness! And it's one of those things where you shoot video or take pictures ahead of time, and then that way when you go to put it back together, you can watch it all. Square nuts, if you have an even-sided driver, most of the time you can get them to work. They do make square nut drivers, but they're expensive and hard to find. Most of this, it's just going through it one by one, making sure everything is in. I put the top cap on here first just to make sure that everything fit in, but then to get the slide on, you either have to put the slide on and then mount the verticals to the base, or you had to take the top off and slide the slide on from the top. I tried doing it both ways, and both of them had their pains. I ended up just doing it by keeping the top on and then connecting the top to the base after putting the slide on it. That probably is pretty confusing. Now, you have to be very careful when pounding this all back together. Make sure you're not pounding on any of the cast iron pieces. Hit it lightly with less pressure, and make sure that you're driving things in correctly without putting force where it's going to cause problem. You want the force to be into the metal pieces and not into the forged pieces. And this is one that was very hard not to. I have the base actually being supported by the table, so I'm pounding down, and so all the force is going through the rod as opposed through the cast iron piece. Hey, look, it turns. And that is the total for it. The last thing is I forgot to put in the little stop on the top, and so that is just a small piece with a screw through it, and this is what that top latch will actually hold onto and hold this piece vertical. So I put the slide onto the vertical and then put the vertical into place, and then we can bolt it all down together and take this thing for a test drive. Here I'm actually cranking the carriage bolts into place, so sucking them into the wood. And then, having a smaller drill would have been useful for getting that in there. And it slides up and down. The little latch holds it at the top, and then you can also ride down on the rail that the gear runs in, and so that makes it a lot easier for extraction. This particular one came with a 1-inch auger bit. The one I'm selling will come with a 1-inch auger bit as well. It needed to be sharpened a good way, and if you want to see videos on that, I do have videos on sharpening auger bits, and it was really, really dull. So for this one, it uses a 1/2-inch bore, and you put it in there, and it runs itself. It drills incredibly fast, incredibly smoothly, and I am just overjoyed with how this thing runs. And it cuts holes just like it's supposed to. Really quick, really efficient, and a lot of fun. So if you're ever doing any timber framing, this is the tool to get. It is fun, it is enjoyable, and it looks absolutely awesome. So there you have it. I have been wanting to do this for a while. I've had this beam drill, and it has a few quirks, but it works fine. It's just not exactly what I want. There's a few things on it that I wish I had, and then I found this one, and this has the few things that I really want. So I decided to actually make this one mine and paint it blue, and so this will be my go-to for a long time in the shop. And I am in love with how smoothly this works. It is exactly what I want in a beam drill. So yes, you will probably be seeing these in a few videos. I do have a few timber framing projects. I do have an old timber framing project where I used this one to make, it was actually just a mailbox post, a very large, beefy mailbox post. But if you are interested in getting one of these, I'm actually going to be selling this one this week on the Can I Have It Facebook group. So if you are watching this on Saturday or Sunday, the auction is probably still live, and there's a link to it down below. So if you would like to get this, I am going to be selling it and shipping it out. So yes, this is very, very pleasing to me, and I'm looking forward to using it for many, many years to come. If you have some projects you'd like to see me do with this, let me know. We'll be having a good bit of fun. So I think that'll about do it for today. I do want to say thank you to all of the patrons on Patreon and members here on the channel, people who've clicked that join button, people who are supporting this channel. Honestly, this channel would not be here without everyone who's supporting it. We are all about the community here, and I want to say a huge thank you to everyone. Everyone who's scrolling over to the side, they're quite literally keeping the lights on. So I think that'll about do it for today. And until next time, have a wonderful day. Beam me up, Scotty.